The Grand Assembly Hall was the largest structure in the known galaxy. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, built from white stone that came from a dead world. 12 species had built it together, long before humans ever learned to leave their own planet. The hall could hold 10,000 beings at once, and today, every seat was filled. Ambassador Park stood alone in the center of the speaking floor. She was a small woman, barely 35 years old, with black hair tied back in a simple knot. She wore the gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, plain and without decoration. Around her, rising up like a mountain on all sides, sat the representatives of the Galactic Council. They sat in the highest seats. They were tall beings, almost 3 meters, with skin like gray stone and eyes that glowed soft blue. They had been traveling between stars for 9,000 years. Next to them sat the creatures of light and crystal who communicated through colors that shifted across their bodies. There were their 2 four-armed warriors with faces like ancient statues, proud and silent. And there were others, the gentle beings with soft fur and large eyes, the who breathed methane and watched through glass tanks, the pale ones, 12 species in total, 12 voices, 12 votes. Humans had no vote. Looked up at council speaker who sat in the highest chair of all. He was old even by their standards, his stone skin cracked with age, his blue eyes dim. The council recognizes the human ambassador, said. His voice was deep and slow, like rocks grinding together. You may speak. Bowed her head slightly. Thank you, speaker. I come before this council with a proposal. She touched a small device on her wrist, and above her a hologram appeared. It showed a planet covered in red spots like wounds on skin. This was Prime. 18 months ago, a plague struck the colonies. 200 million beings have died. The plague continues to spread. Paused. Earth has developed a cure, medical that can destroy the disease completely. We have tested them. They work. A wave of color passed through the representatives. The ambassador, a small being named, leaned forward with hope in his large eyes. We offer this technology freely to the, continued. We ask nothing for the cure itself. His eyes brightened slightly. Then what do you ask, human? A seat on this council, a permanent voice, a vote. Silence fell over the hall. Then laughed. It was a terrible sound, like stones falling down a mountain. Other council members joined him. They laughed at the small human woman standing alone on the floor below them. Humans have been in space for barely 300 years, said when the laughter died down. They were building starships when your ancestors were living in caves. They had mapped half the galaxy before your species learned to use fire. He leaned forward in his great chair. You are children, useful children, yes. Your ships are fast, your soldiers are brave, your technology is sometimes clever, but you are not ready to sit with the elder races. His face showed nothing. The precedent. The precedent is clear, interrupted. 1,000 years of space travel, 1,000 years of contribution to galactic society. Those are the requirements for council membership. You have not met them. We have contributed, said quietly. For 200 years we have contributed. And we thank you for your service. His voice was dismissive, like an adult speaking to a child. Now give us the technology. They are dying. Stood very still for a long moment. The entire hall watched her, waiting for the argument, waiting for the begging. Humans were emotional creatures. Everyone knew this. She would cry, perhaps. She would make desperate appeals. She would remind them of human soldiers who died defending council worlds, of human ships that carried council goods, of human engineers who fixed council stations. But did none of these things. Instead, she simply bowed her head. I understand, she said. She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. Ambassador Park called out surprised. The technology. Stopped but did not turn around. Earth will consider the council's position and respond through appropriate channels. Then she was gone. looked at the other council members with confusion in his old eyes, the flickered uncertain colors, the exchanged glances. Even the ambassador seemed unsure whether to feel hope or fear. "Strange creatures, humans," said finally. "They will return. They always do. They need us far more than we need them." The council members nodded in agreement. Of course the humans would return. What choice did they have? 3 hours later, Park sat alone in her ship, orbiting far from the Grand Assembly Hall. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady as she opened a communication channel to Earth. "This is Ambassador Park. Authorization code 77 Delta 9. Connect me to the Emergency Council." The screen flickered and the faces of Earth leaders appeared. President sat in the center, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes and gray hair. Around her sat the ministers of defense, trade, science, and foreign affairs. "We watched the session," President said. "We saw everything." "Then you know my recommendation," replied. There was a long pause. The ministers looked at each other. They had discussed this possibility for months, but hoping it would never come to this. "Are we certain?" asked Defense Minister, a man with a soldier's bearing and a diplomat's caution. "This cannot be undone." "They laughed at us," said simply. "For 200 years we have bled for them, died for them, built for them, and they laughed." President closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her decision was made. "Protocol silence," she said. "Effective immediately." Nodded, understood. She closed the channel and sat back in her chair, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the council was probably already forgetting about the small human woman who had asked for a seat at their table. They would move on to other business, other concerns. They would assume humans would come crawling back within months. They were wrong. Within 12 hours, every human embassy in the galaxy received the same coded message. Within 24 hours, human diplomats were packing their belongings and boarding ships. Within 48 hours, the embassies stood empty. Human cargo ships, which carried nearly half of all goods between council worlds, changed course and headed home. Human soldiers, who served on dozens of council defense stations, quietly requested transfers back to Earth. Human scientists, engineers, doctors, and teachers sent polite resignation letters to their alien employers. Within 72 hours, humanity vanished from galactic society. No explanations were given, no angry speeches were made, no demands were issued. Humans simply left. On the council worlds, the first reactions were confusion, then annoyance, then dismissal. "Let them sulk," told the other council members. "They will return when they realize they cannot survive alone. The galaxy does not need humans, but humans most certainly need the galaxy." The council moved on. There were other matters to discuss, important matters. The humans would come back, everyone was sure of it. 1 year passed. Then another. The humans did not come back. And slowly, quietly, like water leaking through cracks in a dam, the council began to realize that perhaps they had made a terrible mistake. But by then, it was already too late. 18 months after the humans left, the first real problems began. It started with small things. A merchant discovered that his usual shipping route now took 3 weeks instead of 1. The human cargo company he had used for decades was gone, and the replacement charged 4 times the price for half the speed. A weapons factory shut down because no one could repair the cooling systems. Human engineers had installed them 50 years ago. They had seemed simple at the time. Now, the factory owners realized they had no idea how the systems actually worked. A hospital on Prime ran out of medical. The tiny machines that had saved millions of lives needed to be recalibrated every year. Humans had always done this, quietly, without asking for payment. Now there was no one left who understood the technology. These were small problems at first. The council barely noticed. They had greater concerns than shipping delays and broken machines. But the small problems grew into bigger ones, and the bigger ones grew into disasters. Admiral Lee stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Resolute, watching the stars through the main. He was 53 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with gray appearing at his temples. He had served in the human fleet for 30 years, fighting in wars that most of humanity had already forgotten. Wars fought for the Council, wars where human soldiers died protecting alien worlds. "Sir," said his communications officer, a young woman named, "we have another request coming through. Merchant convoy requesting passage through the Delta corridors. Did not turn from the window. They say it will add 6 weeks to their journey if they go around. Then they will have a long journey." Hesitated. "Sir, they are threatening to report us to the Council." Now turned, and there was something cold in his eyes. "The Council has no authority here. The Delta corridors pass through human-charted space. We mapped those routes. We built the navigation beacons. We maintained them for 2 centuries while the Council took our ships for granted." He paused. "Those corridors are closed to non-allied traffic. That is the law." "What should I tell them, sir?" "Tell them nothing. Silence is its own message." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human-charted jump routes, the fastest paths between distant stars, were suddenly unavailable. Human-built communication relays went dark. Human-maintained supply stations closed their doors. The Council had never realized how much infrastructure humanity had quietly built over 200 years. Humans had never asked for recognition. They had simply seen problems and fixed them, built things that needed building, maintained systems that needed maintaining. Now all of that was gone. On Prime, the situation grew desperate. The plague had been stopped by the human, but now those were failing. Without Annual, they slowly broke down. And as they broke down, the plague began to return. Ambassador stood before the Council, his soft fur matted with worry, his large eyes wet with fear. "Please," he begged. "Our people are dying again. We need the humans. We need their help." Sat in his high chair, looking older than ever. "We have tried to contact them. Earth does not respond." "Then send ships, send diplomats, send anyone." "We have sent ships. They were turned away at the border of human space." His voice was heavy. "The humans will not even speak to us." Fell to his knees. "Then what do we do?" No one had an answer. In the seats reserved for junior council members, of the watched in silence. She was young by her species standards, barely 200 years old, her crystal body shifting through shades of troubled blue. She had been the only council member to vote in favor of giving humans their seat. She had been mocked for it, called a fool, told she did not understand the traditions of the elder races. Now she watched those elder races flounder, and she felt no satisfaction, only fear. After the session ended, she approached in his private chambers. The old was sitting alone, staring at a map of the galaxy. Red lights marked trouble spots. There were many red lights. "Speaker," said softly, "may I speak?" Waved a heavy hand. "Speak." "We need to understand what we have lost. We need to make a complete accounting of human contributions to galactic society." Looked at her with tired eyes. "Why, we know what they did. They ran cargo ships. They served as soldiers. They built some technology." "With respect, Speaker, I do not think we know. I do not think we have ever known." Moved closer to the map. "I have been doing research. Did you know that humans handled 40% of all cargo transport? Not because they were required to, not because they were paid the most, simply because they were reliable. They showed up on time. They delivered what they promised. They charged fair prices." Said nothing. "Did you know that human engineers designed the cooling systems used in 60% of all council industrial facilities? The systems were so efficient that no one ever questioned them. No one ever asked how they worked. We simply assumed they would work forever." "Get to your point." My point, speaker, is that we took humans for granted, not just their request for a council seat. We took everything for granted. Every contribution they made was seen as expected. We never thanked them. We never recognized them. We simply took and took and took. Stone's face was hard to read, but something flickered in his dim blue eyes. They are children. They should have been grateful that we allowed them to serve. And yet these children are the only ones who know how to save the. These children built the roots that connect our empire. These children fought and died in wars that protected our worlds. His crystal body pulsed with deep purple frustration. They asked for one thing, speaker, one seat at this council, and we laughed at them. The precedent. The precedent is 1,000 years old. Perhaps it is time for a new precedent. Rose to his full height, towering over. You forget yourself, child. They have been council members for 6,000 years. You do not tell me about precedent. Did not back down. And in 6,000 years, have they ever faced a crisis we could not solve? Have we ever watched our trade routes collapse? Have we ever seen our factories go silent? She paused. The humans did not need us, speaker. They never needed us. They stayed because they believed in cooperation, in partnership, in the idea that different species could work together for something greater. And now they have learned that we never saw them as partners, only as servants, turned to leave. I hope we find a way to survive without them, but I fear we will not. She walked out, leaving alone with his map of red lights. That night sent another message to Earth. This time, he wrote it himself. He explained that the council was willing to discuss the matter of human membership. He expressed regret for the way the last meeting had ended. He asked politely for a response. The message traveled across the stars at the speed of light. It reached Earth's communication network and was received by the appropriate systems. The reply came exactly 1 hour later. It was a single word, no. Nothing else, no explanation, no conditions, no negotiation. Just that one small word, echoing across the empty space between stars. Stared at the message for a long time. In 9,000 years of history, no species had ever said no to them. They were the eldest race, the founders of the council. Their word was law. But the humans had said no. And somehow that small word was more frightening than any weapon, any army, any threat the galaxy had ever known. The humans were not coming back. And the council had no idea how to survive without them. The frontier zone was the edge of known space, a region of young stars and unexplored worlds that lay beyond the borders of the Galactic Council. For centuries, the elder races had sent exploration fleets into this vast emptiness, mapping new systems and searching for resources. They were the greatest explorers. Their four-armed warriors were fearless, their ships were fast, and their hunger for new conquests was endless. When the humans left, they barely noticed. They did not need human cargo ships or human engineers. They were warriors. They would explore the frontier alone. Fleet Commander led 12 warships into the unexplored sector known as Grid 7. It was a routine mission. Chart the stars, scan for useful planets, return home with glory. They had done this 1,000 times before. They did not expect to find The first sign of trouble was a strange energy reading on the edge of the system. Ordered his ships to investigate. They found nothing at first. Just empty space and distant stars. Then they appeared. They came out of nowhere, ships that seemed to fold out of space itself. They were black and angular, covered in spines and weapons that glowed with cold light. There were hundreds of them, surrounding the fleet in seconds. Tried to communicate. He sent greetings in every known language, signals of peace, offers of trade. They did not respond. Instead, they opened fire. The battle lasted 4 minutes. Weapons, which could tear through the strongest council ships, barely scratched the armor. Shields, which had never failed in 2,000 years of warfare, collapsed under the alien assault. 3 ships were destroyed in the first minute, then 5 more, then 2 more. Watched his fleet die around him. In desperation, he sent a distress signal on every frequency. He called for help from anyone who could hear, anyone who could save them. Far across the frontier, Commander sat in the captain's chair of the human science vessel Horizon. She was 42 years old, with short black hair and calm eyes that had seen too many battles. The Horizon was a small ship, designed for research rather than combat, but it carried weapons and knew how to use them. "Commander," said her sensor officer, a young man named, "we are receiving a distress signal. Identification codes." Turned to look at him. Distance. 6 hours at maximum speed. What is the nature of the emergency? Worked his console for a moment. His face went pale. They are under attack. Unknown hostile force. They have already lost 8 ships. He looked up at. They are asking for anyone to help them. Anyone at all. Sat very still for a long moment. She thought about their representatives at the council, how they had laughed loudest when Park asked for a seat. She thought about generals who had sent human soldiers to die in battles that served no one but interests. She thought about the contempt the four-armed warriors had always shown for the weak and emotional humans. "Commander's voice was uncertain. "Should we respond?" "No," said. The bridge went silent. Her crew stared at her. "Commander," said her second officer, a woman named, "there are thousands on those ships. They will all die." "They are not our allies," replied. Her voice was flat, empty of emotion. "The council made that clear. They laughed when we asked for partnership. They told us we were children, not worthy of sitting at their table." She turned back to "We are under no obligation to help them." "But we could save them." "Yes, we could," did not move, "but we will not." The Horizon continued on its course. The distress signal continued to broadcast, and in Grid 7 the fleet died. When it was over, only 3 ships remained. Was dead, his flagship torn apart by weapons. The survivors fled, their jump drives screaming as they pushed beyond all safety limits to escape the monsters that had appeared from nowhere. They did not pursue, they had made their point. News of the massacre reached the council 2 days later. 40,000 dead. An entire exploration fleet destroyed. And worst of all, a new enemy had appeared. An enemy with weapons and ships beyond anything the council had ever seen. Called an emergency session. The Great Hall was filled with fear and anger. The representatives demanded vengeance. The flickered with panic. The still dying from the returning plague could only watch in despair. "We must prepare for war," the ambassador declared. His 4 arms were raised in fury, his stone face twisted with rage. "The must be destroyed." "With what?" asked quietly. "Our trade routes are broken, our factories are failing. Half our military stations have gone dark because no one knows how to maintain them." She looked around the hall. "We cannot fight a war. We can barely keep our civilization running." "Then we must ask the humans for help," of the pleaded. "They were always our strongest warriors. They always found ways to win battles that seemed impossible." Shook his great head. "We have tried, they do not respond." "Then we try again, we beg. We offer them anything they want." The debate continued for hours. Finally, sent an official message to Earth's Defense Ministry demanding an explanation. A fleet had been destroyed. The Council needed to know if humans had detected any signs of this new threat. The Council needed human military support. The response came from Defense Minister. It was brief and cold. "They were attacked in unclaimed space beyond Council borders. Earth has no treaty obligations in that region. We are not required to defend species that have declared us unworthy of partnership. We defended our allies for 2 centuries. You told us our service was worthless. We listened." Read the message aloud to the council. When he finished, the hall was silent. "They are going to let us die," the ambassador whispered. "They are going to sit in their little system and watch while they destroy us." No one disagreed. Over the following weeks, they began probing council borders. Small raids at first, a mining station destroyed, a colony attacked. Nothing that threatened the heart of council space, but enough to spread fear, enough to show that they could strike anywhere, anytime. The council military tried to respond, but their response revealed what everyone had feared. Without human tactical support, council fleets were slow and uncoordinated. Without human weapon systems, their firepower was outdated. Without human soldiers, their ground forces were weak. For 200 years, humans had been the backbone of council defense. They had never demanded credit. They had never asked for recognition. They had simply done the work, quietly and efficiently, because they believed in the council. They believed in cooperation. They believed that their service would eventually be rewarded. It never was. And now, faced with the greatest threat in galactic history, the Council realized that they had thrown away their greatest weapon. On Earth, the leaders watched the reports from Council space. They saw the attacks. They saw the death tolls rise. They saw the fear spreading across 100 worlds. President met with her advisors in a secure chamber deep beneath the surface. "They are dying out there," she said. "Millions of them." "They chose this," replied. "They laughed at us. They called us children. They took everything we gave and offered nothing in return." "I know," the president's voice was tired, "but watching them suffer does not make us feel better, does it?" No one answered. "We will wait," decided. "We will watch, and when they have learned what we are truly worth, perhaps we will talk again." In the darkness of space, they waited. They had found the Council. They had tested its defenses, and they had found those defenses weak. The real war was about to begin. Earth had changed in the 3 years since Protocol Silence began. The planet that had once sent its best people to serve the galaxy now turned inward. Human scientists developed new technologies for human use alone. Human factories built ships for human fleets only. Human resources stayed on human worlds. And in the great cities of Earth, a generation of children grew up learning a new lesson. The galaxy did not deserve their help. In the heart of Geneva, the old diplomatic center stood quiet. Once, it had been filled with alien ambassadors and council representatives. Now, most of the building was empty. Only a skeleton staff remained, monitoring communications and maintaining the silence. Director Minyu Song ran the Foreign Affairs office from a small room on the top floor. He was a thin man in his 50s, with silver-rimmed glasses and a face that rarely showed emotion. He had spent 30 years building relationships with alien species, learning their languages, understanding their cultures. He had believed that someday, humans would be accepted as equals. Now he knew that day would never come. Not because humans were not worthy, but because the Council would never see them as anything more than useful servants. The message came on a cold morning in December. A ship had entered human space, requesting permission to dock. It carried a diplomatic delegation. They wanted to talk. Minyu considered refusing. It would have been easy. One word and the ship would turn around. The silence would continue. The Council would keep suffering. But he was curious. After 3 years of being ignored, the Council was finally ready to send someone in person. He wanted to see their faces. He wanted to hear what they had to say. "Let them dock," he ordered. "I will meet them." The delegation consisted of only one person. She came alone, without guards or assistants, her crystal body dim with exhaustion. The journey from Council space had been long and difficult. Human-charted routes were closed, and she had been forced to take the slow paths that added weeks to every trip. Minyu met her in a small conference room with bare walls and a single window. He did not offer refreshments. He did not exchange pleasantries. He simply sat down across from her and waited. Settled into her chair, her colors shifting through shades of gray and pale blue. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. Minyu said nothing. "The Council sent me because I was the only one who voted to give humans a seat, continued. They thought you might be more willing to listen to me. Were they right? His colors flickered with something that might have been sadness. I do not know, I hope so, because if you refuse to help us, I do not think there will be a council left to save. She told him everything. The attacks, the crumbling infrastructure, the plague returning on Prime, the failures of the council military, the fear that spread through every species, every world, every heart. We need you, she said simply. We cannot survive without you. Minyu listened without expression. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. What do you want? He asked finally. Whatever it takes. Name your price. A seat on the council, 10 seats, resources, territory, whatever you want, we will give it. Minyu smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You misunderstand. This is not a negotiation. This is a consequence. His colors darkened. I do not understand. Let me explain. Minyu stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains. Humans did not leave because we were angry. We left because we learned something about the council, something we should have understood long ago. He turned back to face her. You never saw us as partners. You never saw us as equals. You saw us as tools. Useful tools, convenient tools, but tools nonetheless. Every contribution we made was taken as expected. Every sacrifice we made was forgotten. Every time we asked for recognition, we were laughed at. The precedent. The precedent was an excuse, a way to keep us in our place while still using our labor, our technology, our soldiers. Minyu's voice remained calm, but his eyes were hard. Do you know how many humans died defending council worlds? In 200 years, more than 4 million. 4 million lives, given for a galaxy that would not even give us a single vote. Had no response. You want us to save you, Minyu continued. But you never asked what saving you cost us, the families who lost loved ones, the resources we spent, the technologies we shared that we could have kept for ourselves. You took everything and told us we were not worthy of sitting at your table. He sat back down across from her. We do not hate you, that would require caring about you. The truth is simpler and sadder. We just stopped caring. We stopped believing that our service would ever be valued. We stopped hoping that things would change. And that is worse, whispered. Is that what you are saying? Yes, anger fades. Hatred burns out. But indifference lasts forever. We are indifferent to your fate now. Not because we are cruel, but because you taught us to be. Was silent for a long time. Her colors had faded to almost nothing, her crystal body dull and gray. Finally, she spoke. What about the millions of innocent beings who will die? The children on Prime who never voted against you? The workers and farmers and teachers who never laughed at your ambassador? Her voice was soft. Are they tools too? The question hung in the air between them. Minyu did not answer immediately. He looked out the window again, watching the last light fade from the sky. No, he said finally, they are not, and that is why I am still talking to you. He turned back to face her. I cannot promise anything. Earth is not united on this. Many of our people believe we should let the council fall. They believe it would be justice. And what do you believe? Minyu smiled that cold smile again. I believe that justice and wisdom are not always the same thing. I believe that sometimes doing what is right is more important than doing what is deserved. He paused. But that is just my belief. The decision belongs to all of humanity. He stood and walked to the door. You will stay in Geneva. I will arrange for comfortable quarters, and I will present your case to the Emergency Council. That is all I can offer. Rose, thank you. Do not thank me yet. The decision may not be the one you want. He opened the door. But at least you will have your answer, one way or another. She nodded and walked out, her colors slowly returning to their normal shifting patterns. It was not hope exactly, but it was something. After 3 years of silence, someone was finally listening. That night, Minu called an emergency session of Earth's leadership. The debate lasted for hours. Some argued for continued isolation. Others argued for conditional assistance. A few argued for full intervention. In the end, no decision was reached. The matter was too important, too complex, too emotional. They would need more time, more discussion, more input from the people of Earth. And while they debated, they continued their advance. The war was coming, whether humanity was ready or not. The invasion began on what the humans called the first day of spring. It was a coincidence, but some said it felt like a cruel joke. As flowers bloomed on Earth and children played in warming sunlight, the greatest war in galactic history tore through Council space. 3 fell in the first month. The industrial colonies, which had built ships for 9,000 years, were reduced to rubble in a single week. The crystal cities, which had stood since before humans existed, shattered under weapons. The species after species found themselves facing an enemy they could not defeat. Refugee fleets filled the space lanes. Billions of beings fled their dying worlds, searching for safety that did not exist. The Council military tried to form defensive lines, but without human coordination, their efforts fell apart. Fleets arrived late to battles. Supply chains broke down. Communications failed at critical moments. On Prime, the plague had returned in full force. The medical now completely failed could do nothing. Hospitals overflowed. Mass graves appeared outside every city. And still the advanced, drawing closer every day. Returned to Earth with recordings of the destruction. She showed them to director Minu Song, to President, to anyone who would watch. Burning cities, dying children, worlds turned to ash. "Please," she begged. "I know what we did to you. I know it was wrong, but this is not justice. This is extinction." The debate on Earth grew louder and more bitter. In the streets, people argued about duty and vengeance, about honor and self-interest. Old soldiers who had served in council wars spoke about comrades who had died far from home. Young people who had grown up during the isolation asked why they should care about aliens who had never cared about them. The emergency council met every day, but still no decision was made. Admiral Lee watched the war from his command ship, stationed at the edge of human space. His fleet was strong, the strongest it had ever been. 3 years of isolation had allowed Earth to build ships without council restrictions, to develop weapons that did not need alien approval. Humanity was ready for war. But not this war, not yet. "How long before they reach us?" asked his tactical officer. "At their current rate of advance, 6 months, maybe less." Nodded grimly. "Then we have 6 months to decide whether to fight on our terms or theirs." The argument that changed everything came from an unexpected voice. Doctor was a scientist who had spent her life studying alien species. She was 61 years old, with gray hair and gentle eyes that had seen too much suffering. Her brother, a soldier, had died 15 years ago in a council border war, a war that no one remembered, fighting for a cause that had long since been forgotten. She asked to speak at the emergency council session. President, knowing's reputation, agreed. Stood before the leaders of humanity, her voice calm and steady. "I have spent my entire life studying the stars," she began. "I have learned about hundreds of species, their cultures, their histories, their dreams, and I have learned one thing above all else." She paused, looking around the room. "The universe is cold, life is rare, intelligence is rarer still. Every species that exists, every mind that thinks, every heart that feels, these are miracles. Not in a religious sense, but in a scientific one. The odds against any of us existing are so vast that existence itself is almost impossible." She touched a control and images appeared on the screens. Children, their large eyes filled with fear. Refugees, their crystal bodies dim with despair. Warriors, broken and lost. "The council treated us badly. That is true. They laughed at us, they used us, they took us for granted, and part of me, a large part, wants to watch them burn. Her voice wavered for just a moment. My brother died for them. He died on a world most humans have never heard of, fighting in a war that served council interests, not ours. And no one thanked him. No one remembered him. He was just another human soldier, used up and thrown away. She took a deep breath. But if we abandon them now, if we sit in our comfortable isolation while they die, we become them. We become the cold, indifferent creatures who only value those who can serve our interests. She looked directly at President. I did not spend my life studying the stars to learn that cruelty is universal. I refuse to believe that. I refuse to accept that intelligence always leads to indifference, that power always leads to abuse. Then what do you suggest? Asked. We help them, not because they deserve it, not because they earned it, but because helping those in need is what makes us human. It is what separates us from the creatures we might become. She smiled sadly. And maybe, just maybe, showing mercy to those who showed us none is the strongest thing we can do. The room was silent when she finished. Then Lee spoke. The Admiral supports intervention, not as servants but as equals. If we fight on our terms, and when it is over they will remember what it cost. The Defense Minister nodded slowly. If we commit fully, no half measures. We go in with everything we have and we end this war. President looked around the room. We vote, all in favor of military intervention. Hands rose. One by one, the leaders of humanity made their choice. When it was done, the vote stood at 11 in favor, 10 against. A single vote. Nodded, the decision is made. Admiral Lee mobilize the fleet. Minister coordinate with planetary defenses. She turned to, Doctor, thank you, your brother would be proud. Said nothing. She only nodded and walked out, her shoulders shaking with silent emotion. The human fleet mobilized within 48 hours. Ships that had been waiting for 3 years finally had a mission. Soldiers who had trained in silence finally had a purpose. The most advanced military force in the galaxy moved toward the front lines. Before they departed, sent one message ahead to, who had returned to Council space. We are coming, not as servants, not as tools, we are coming as equals, and when this is over, you will remember what it cost. You will remember the names of every human who falls. You will remember that we came not because you deserved it, but because it was right. The message spread across Council space like wildfire. In the refugee camps, beings wept with relief. In the military command centers, officers felt hope for the first time in months. On Prime, dying children heard whispers that help was finally on the way. And in the halls of the Grand Assembly, read the message 3 times. He was old, broken, his stone skin cracked and his blue eyes dim. He had ruled the council for centuries. He had laughed at a small human woman who only wanted a seat at the table. Now that woman's people were coming to save him, not because he deserved saving, but because they were better than he was. It was, he realized, the greatest defeat of his long life. The human fleet entered Council space on the first day of summer. 60 warships, 200 support vessels, 50,000 soldiers, the largest human military deployment in history. And leading them all, Admiral Lee stood on his bridge, watching the stars rush past. Behind him, the sun of Earth grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among billions. All ships, he commanded, this is Admiral Lee. We are entering combat space. Remember why we are here. Remember what we are fighting for. He paused, thinking of all the humans who had served the Council for 2 centuries, all the ones who had died without recognition, all the ones who had been forgotten. We fight for them, he said quietly, and we fight for ourselves, for the humanity we choose to be. The fleet accelerated toward the front lines. The war was about to change.